Good morning, friends, and welcome to Gardening on the Gulf Coast, a series that's brought to you by the Southeast Agriculture and Natural Resources region, a group of horticulturists that have been bringing you these gardening programs for the past couple of months. I'm going to start just a minute early just to remind everyone that if you have your microphone unmuted, please mute your microphone, as well as any video feed that you do have. We want to make sure that the presenter can present uninterrupted, and that as a courtesy to your fellow registrants as well. It'll make sure that everything runs smoothly. We will have an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you do have questions, please place them in the chat box of your viewer. We have a team of horticulturists that will be answering questions for you. Myself, Stephen Bruggerhoff, horticulturist with Brazoria County AgriLife Extension. We have additional programs that are coming up today, this month, at the end of the month, October 28th, Growing Healthy Palms with Ginger Easton Smith. She's the A&R agent down in Aransas County. We think that you'll really enjoy the program today. It's being, of course, it's sponsored by our organization. Paul Winski is going to be presenting for you Texas Superstar Plants. Paul has a really long relationship with AgriLife Extension. He's the horticulturist in Harris County, and he's got some great programs from Harris County. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Paul. But before I do that again, Paul, sorry, we are recording this broadcast, and it will be available to you after the presentation. We will also be providing a survey to you. We want to get an idea of how we're doing through this series. So thank you again for your support, and Paul, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen, for that introduction. I want to welcome everybody from the Gulf Coast that is tuning in today. And as Stephen said, I am here in Harris County, and I am going to be talking about Texas Superstar Plants. So you may be wondering, what are Texas Superstar Plants? And if you're not aware of the program, here's
Paul, your microphone is muted.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So again, let me just, I want to thank Stephen for that introduction. Sorry about that technical difficulty, but that's why we've got backup folks here to catch these things. So what I want to do is talk about the Texas Superstar program. If you are not aware of the program, we've got a few slides just to touch on it, and then we will get into the plants, which everybody, I'm sure, is excited about. So as you know, Texas is a diverse place. It's a difficult place to grow plants. I've always been on the industry side. I've worked with growers that have grown in Florida and that have grown here in Texas, and these growers have said it's more difficult growing here in Texas than it is even in Florida. So I don't know if that's something we should be proud of, but it is challenging. So in order to find these plants that perform well, that get that label of Texas Superstars, you can see here the image on the left shows the climatic zones. Okay, and I'm sure this has probably even changed a little bit. I'm sure 9B down here, down in the valley may be 10A by now. But so we're looking at, we've got 6A all the way down to 9B, which is a challenge, because what will do well for some folks down in our area may not do so well up in the Panhandle. So climatically, there's a challenge. And then the image here on the right shows the challenge with regard to precipitation. So if you're in West Texas, where you're getting under 14 inches on a regular basis, and then you come over to East Texas, where we're above 50 plus inches of rain, finding those plants that will perform well under these conditions, they do well in the landscape. Growers can produce them. They're readily available. They look good in a pot at sale, but then they also perform well in the landscape. So this is the challenge in order for these plants to make it into the program.
Paul, your microphone is muted again.
Okay.
but just for the last few seconds.
Okay, yeah, I know. I see what happened there. Okay. I think I've got it figured out now. Thanks, Stephen. Okay, so we look at our major trial sites here. Of course, we've got College Station. We've got a site in Overton, so that's covering East Texas. We've got Lubbock to cover west and out in the up in the Panhandle area, and then we've got San Antonio. So there is a committee, there's a board that will bring so many plants in each year. The initial trials will be done at these sites. And then as they start to make it through the pipeline, those that rise to the top, those plants are then given out to the horticulture agents. So myself, Stephen, everybody, every county that has a hort agent, we will get some of these plants to bring back to our area to grow out to make sure that these plants are going to perform well for us. And then if there are issues, we provide feedback to that group in order to allow them, give them some insight so they will make a right decision with regard to the plants that make it into the program. As with everything else, there is a great website. All the plants that are currently in the program, and this program probably started in the mid to late 90s. So it's been around a while, and there's quite a few plants. There is a new booklet, which I'm going to hold up right here if we can see it. We'll see how that looks. There we go. If you're in the Harris County area and you would like a copy of that book, you can stop by the office and pick it up. If not, if you go to this site, you can download it, the PDF, or you can just see the images that are there. But it lets you know about the plants, which plants are in there. One of the questions that people always ask is, where can I find these? There is a retailers tab up there. So you can click on that and find out which retailers in your area may be carrying these plants. So that helps you to track them down. But the website is texassuperstar.com. Okay. So let's talk about some new additions. There were a lot of additions in 2020, which is surprising. 2020 hasn't been a great year for everybody with regard to COVID and everything else, but there have been some really good plants that have been introduced into this program. The first is Evolvulus, blue Daze, heat-loving, low-growing. Those of you along the coast, it does have salt tolerance, and it has a really nice, clean blue. Blue flowers are always a challenge. We're always looking for blue. There's plenty of yellows and oranges and things, but this cooling color, this blue, always gives a nice contrast. You're going to want this in the front of the bed. It works great in hanging baskets. And if you are using it in a combination planter, this would be one of the spillers. This would have a cascading effect. So it's very flexible in how you can use it. You can see here landscape height is about 9 to 18 inches. So it's not very tall, but it's going to get wide. So it's going to cover some space for you. But throughout the entire season, you're going to see these blue flowers produce over the entire top of the plant. The other one is one of my favorites is Portulaca or Purslane. This is one that if you've got a hot, dry area in full sun, don't put this plant in the shade. Put it in the full sun. This is one of my pet peeves. A lot of times we'll go to garden centers and they'll have Portulaca under the shade. Well, the flowers won't open if they're in the shade. And so the end consumer is not going to know how great this plant looks. But the colors are very intense. This is one of the single varieties. This is a picture of Rio Grande. Rio Grande is one of the series that they recommend, Rio Grande or Cupcake. But once it is planted and established, it's very heat and drought tolerant. It's got a succulent type foliage, which will help it through some of the drier conditions. Again, this is another one that is going to be a spreader, a low grower. So you're going to want this in the front of the bed, and it's going to get wider than it will taller. But the colors are really truly electric. And when the full sun is on these petals and these flowers that are open, it really puts on an extremely good show. So I just love the colors on these. And there are double varieties, double flowered varieties. This is a single. It almost looks like a single rose. But there are double flowered varieties, and the breeders are starting to get to the point where um, uh, there are varieties now where the flowers will open even under lower light conditions, which is a plus. But this is, again, for full sun, this will light up that spot. Pentas are great. I love pentas. Through the heat of the summer, there are a lot of series. There's a lot of um, options with regard to pentas, because you can have dwarf varieties that are about 4 to 6 inches tall, and we can have larger varieties that we can use as cut flowers. They love the full sun, and what I like about them is, you always want added interest in that landscape. And pentas will bring in pollinators and beneficial insects, and they just, through the heat of the summer, they're just nonstop. The color range on these, this is a pink one. There's more bicolors out there now, and so they just do extremely well. I would say, like, from June on. I've got some in my garden still, and they're just nonstop bloom. Butterflies love them. Bumblebees love them. So this is definitely one annual that I would always recommend, that it's a can't miss, because you can forget about it for a while, and it just still thrives in our growing conditions. Now, we also had another Petunia. So we've got Tidal Wave Red Velour. And the tidal waves, of all if you know the wave series, the tidal waves are the largest. And you can see the landscape size here. This is going to get almost 3 feet tall, and is going to be at least 3 to almost 6 feet wide, or 5 feet wide. So this is one that, if you've got an embankment, if you've got an area that you can just let it go, one plant is going to cover a lot of area. And this, as a hanging basket, is just going to envelop that basket, and you're going to get a complete a heavy cascade of this plant in production. The thing that I like about the tidal waves are, look at how the flower production is over the entire plant. I was always on the industry side when these first came out. We always used to say they sort of had the donut effect, where all the flowers were on the edge, but there was no flowering over top of the plant. Well, like anything else, improvements occur with breeding programs, and now you just have extremely large numbers of flowers, very good colors, very good consistency. So this also joins tidal wave silver and cherry. So now we've got 3 tidal waves in this program. So, if you want to make a bold statement with some petunias, especially now, we're starting to get into petunia season. Cooler weather is when petunias do, I feel, much better here than when we get into the heat of the summer. So the tidal waves are going to definitely cover a lot of area and put on quite the flower show. Another one that was new for this year is a Mexican heather. This is Cuphea, and this is the variety Allyson. So I'm pretty sure everybody has seen Mexican heather. It's a nice, tight little plant, small foliage, delicate flowers, usually in that rose purple color. Allyson has the rose purple. There are some white flowered varieties out there, but it's a nice, clean, tight plant. If you were using this in the bed, probably in the front, maybe to the middle, depending on how low growing you've got something in front of it. If you're using it in a combination planter, it's going to be more of a filler. It's going to be something that's going to just add a little bit of color to it. Again, through the heat of the summer, this one blooms nonstop. All right, so that's the new guys on the block, for 2020. So let's touch on some of the other superstars, and these are ones that I feel that if someone asked me, these are some of my go-to plants that I would recommend as Texas superstars that you can't go wrong with. So salvia, everybody loves salvia, and we've got salvia for you. We've got 3 different salvias in this offering. They're all perennial, which is great. You can plant them and forget about them. You're going to have to do some maybe some division or some shearing and things like that. But the first one that I like is here on the left side is Mystic Spires Blue. So if you remember indigo spires would probably get up about 5 to 6 feet tall, very leggy. It produced well, but it didn't look real great in the landscape. Mystic Spires Blue, it's a interspecific hybrid, and it's got a much more manageable growth habit. So you're seeing here about 18 to 30 inches. And again, it depends on where you are. If you're further north, say if you were up in the Dallas area, it's probably going to be a little bit more compact. In our area in Houston, it's at least I'd say 22 to 30 inches, but it is nonstop through the heat of the summer. I pruned mine at the house. I pruned back twice already. It's on its second flush. It's blooming again. The bumblebees are on it, so it's something that you're going to want, further back in the bed. You're not going to want this up front unless it's a specimen. It's something that you want as the focal point. But this is one that you're going to want a little bit further back in the bed. The next one in the middle is Mexican bush sage, which is Salvia leucantha. Drought tolerant once established. You can see the flower spike production on this, and you can see how it's sort of these other plants and how it just sort of jumps out that purple color. This is one that is blooming now. So this is one that comes in late summer through fall. And I always tell, whether I'm teaching master gardeners or talking to industry folks on the landscape side, is the great thing about living in this part of the country is we can have color year round. And so you always want to have some sort of interest. What's going to get you to come out of the house into the garden to see what's happening? And so, Salvia leucantha with a late summer in through the fall, it's another great plant to have in order to draw you out. Beneficials love it. Hummingbirds love it. So it's another great perennial to have. And then the last one here on the left side is on the right side here is Henry Dolberg. This was a found plant out in West Texas by Greg Grant, who's now one of our horticulture agents up in East Texas. And this is another one that once it starts blooming, it never stops. And so I always like to give it a shear back, maybe midsummer, just to let it catch its breath, because if not, it will just continually bloom. Landscape height, I'm going to say it's more in that 4 to 6 foot range. If you prune it on a regular basis, you can keep it at 3 feet, but this is one that will just nonstop bloom. And to me, the story behind this plant is really the thing that's really interesting. Real quick, Greg was out collecting plants. They stopped by a cemetery. They saw this plant was blooming. Cemeteries have very low maintenance, especially out in West Texas. There wasn't much going on out there, but this plant was in bloom. He found it. They took some cuttings. They tried to ID it. They couldn't actually get a true ID on it. So the name Henry Dolberg came about because this plant was found by Mr. Dolberg's headstone. And so that's how it came to be as Henry Dolberg salvia. So sometimes the plants have really excellent stories behind them. Next up, we've got a combination of hibiscus, mosquito. So again, hardy hibiscus, perennial hibiscus. And these are the flare hibiscus. And these were bred by Dr. Moy over in San Antonio. He used to work at the San Antonio Botanical Garden. But these are great large flowers, 9 inches across. Very low maintenance once they are in the garden. Again, at least 6 feet tall by 6 feet wide. So you are going to want to give it some space. Again, back in the bed, not something that's right up front because it's going to eat everything else alive. So we've got the original flare, which is here on the left side, which is the red. And then we have peppermint flare, which is, excuse me. Then we have peppermint flare, which has this very unique, it's a white soft pink, but it has this flecking and striations in it with this pink eye. So it's a really unique look. That we normally don't see in hardy hibiscus. And then here on the right, we've got pink flare. So these three colors play off of each other extremely well. So, you know, if you have the room and you want to have, you could have the three of these and have some really interesting color combinations that work off of each other extremely well. But very bold, very large, very gaudy flowers, which everybody likes because you can't miss these when they are in bloom. The next one I like is Tacoma stands. This is Gold Star. These bell-shaped flowers in these clusters. Again, through the heat of the summer into the fall. I know I've seen a few in our neighborhood. They are still in bloom. Depending on where you are. So if you're further south, this might be evergreen for you down there. Where we are here, it will hold its foliage, but if we get anywhere near, you know, below 40 or so, you know, it's not happy, but it comes back year after year. So it's a great plant to have. If you've got areas where you've got some deer problems, this is deer resistant. Again, and it will also attract pollinators. But you can just see the height of this plant, the flower production on it, and then the up close really gives you a good idea of that bell-shaped flower, and you can see the bud production on this. So again, color, and a plant that's going to hold up in our growing conditions. So I really like the Tacoma Gold Star. Now, this is one that we had at our Bear Creek office, and we did not produce this when I was in the nursery side, but man, I really like this plant. This is a Thyralis, Galphimia glauca. It's an evergreen shrub. And it produces these spikes with these clusters of yellow flowers. Performs extremely well in the full sun. Again, another deer-resistant plant. So if you've got some issues with that, but it's just, I would say at least 9 months, maybe 10 months out of the year, this is going to have some flowers on it. It's going to have some color. And so it's a very good plant. Never see any disease issues with it. And so this is one that I would, you know, as a foundation planting, you know, this is going to be about, you know, 4 to 6 feet tall. So again, further back in the bed or a foundation planting, but Thyralis is one that you really can't go wrong with. And you will definitely enjoy those yellow flowers throughout the year. Now, Napier grass. Okay, this is several new ones. The one on the left side, black stockings, is actually another new addition for 2020. And so this is a pennisetum. These are pennisetums, and they are hybrids. So you can see they both have these wide blades that cascade down. They open up, and they just look like a fountain, actually, the way they present themselves, sort of that vase-shaped habit. They're very heat and drought tolerant. Now, this is one where, since we are in the Gulf Coast, this will probably overwinter for us and can become a perennial. In other areas, if you were up in the Dallas and up in the Panhandle, this is going to be an annual. Once it hits 32 degrees, this plant's not going to like it, and it's going to freeze out and die back. So we've got two offerings here. We've got black stockings, which is the more robust and bolder plant. This one's going to get about 8 to 10 feet tall. So you can see how that has a striking look in the landscape. And then we've got Princess Caroline, which is about 4 to 6 feet tall. I've got Princess Caroline at the house. It did overwinter for me here in Houston, and it send out the flower spike like we see on other pennisetums, but it just gives you that nice color contrast. The other thing I like about these is even when they are uh, as they're growing, any of the grasses, you know, if we get a breezy day or a windy day, just the way they move in that breeze, you know, they're not static in the landscape. They're pretty dynamic, and so it gives you another look and another dimension that you can add to the garden. Angelonia, summer snapdragon. This is a great plant. That, you know, this along with the pentas that we talked about. If you want color through the heat of the summer, these two plants work well with each other. Now, it's got the name snapdragon in it for the common name, but it is not a snapdragon. It's not in the same genus. But these have a very nice mounding habit, and then we get these flower spikes nonstop throughout the heat of the summer. I was at our trial beds at the other garden, and we still have these guys are still blooming their heads off, and they've been doing it all summer, and we're into October. So a lot of times, some of these plants you might get tired of looking at them, but the colors are great. You've got blues, you've got purples, you've got rose, you've got white. Um, the spike on these, you can cut these and also bring them in as a cut flower. You can give them a shot, but again, they're not going to be, you know, like a snapdragon. They just give you that effect. They got that spike and they have that look. There are some newer varieties that are coming out where the flower is getting a little bit larger, maybe twice the size it is there. But it's one that is just a nonstop bloomer through the heat of the summer. Now, this is one. The Whopper begonias are definitely you know, made for Texas. They were bred for Texas. These guys are bold. They're bodacious. They've got a lot of flowers. They got large foliage and large flowers. Um, I think they do much better if they can get some partial shade. So this image here, both of these images are by the front of my house. Even though they are facing south, I've got a large oak, and so they don't get a lot of full sun. They get some a little bit in the morning, but these guys are just, again, I can't say it enough. A lot of flowers, heavy blooming. Um, where I had it overwintered for me because we didn't get that cold this past year. So I got 2 years out of these plants, but the color on them is just really spectacular. Now, let you know is if there are bronze varieties with the whoppers and there are the green leaf. Of course, you can tell this is the green leaf. If you want the bronze and you want that bronze to show more or to even provide a better contrast, it's got to have a little bit more full sun. The more full sun it gets, the bronzier, the darker that foliage is going to be. So you're going to see a much better contrast then with the bronze ones if they're getting a little bit more full sun. But these are great in planters. I've seen them in the landscape, and they can just cover an area and really put on a show. So whoppers are ones you might want to consider. If we look at vines, this is one that is blooming extremely well right now, and it blooms all summer. This is the butterfly vine or Muscagnia. It is an evergreen. It's got very clean foliage, and you can see these yellow flower clusters that it produces throughout the growing season. But the really cool thing is, again, as we talk about interest, uniqueness in your landscape, is as these flowers are pollinated and as they set seed, this is where it gets its name for butterfly vine. It's that seed pod here. And if you have kids around, as they dry, you can clip these off, and we do it. The master gardeners do it with some of the youth programs. They actually paint them, and they paint them like butterflies. So it's a cool little craft that you can do with the kids, but it's a plant that does very well. It's not a clinger. You know, it doesn't have the tendrils, so you're going to have to help it a little bit to get it started. But once you get it going, you know, up some sort of support, it will take care of itself. Althea, now we've got another type of hardy hibiscus. This is Hibiscus syriacus. This is Blue Angel. So I really like the habit on this because it's very upright. So it's not a spreader. It plays well with others, I guess I'd like to say, and it blooms throughout the entire summer. Landscape height, mine at the house is probably about 6 feet. But it is just covered with blooms from early spring throughout the summer. The bees are always working it, so it's a good looking plant. There is also a white flower version of this, but Blue Angel is one that is quite hardy, does extremely well here, and I just like the overall that upright habit where it's not going to spread and be too aggressive against the other plants that you might have in the bed. Ornamental peppers. We've got 3 ornamental peppers that are Texas superstars, and I touched on these because this is the time of year when I think ornamental peppers really shine. So we 3 of them. If we go from left to right here, we've got Basket of Fire. All right. So the thing that I like about both Basket of Fire and New Mex Twilight is how they hold the fruits above the foliage. Okay, so you can see them. So it gets that name Basket of Fire because as it opens cream, or as the fruit is set, it's cream, and then it turns to orange, and then it turns to red. So use your imagination, and it looks like flames, coming up out of that plant. But these peppers are also quite hot. All right, so these peppers on the Scoville heat units are at about 80,000. So what does that mean? So as a reference, a jalapeno is anywhere from 2,500 to 8,000, and a cayenne pepper is anywhere from 30 to 50,000. So these are hotter than a cayenne pepper. All right. So if you're into that, you can enjoy them as an ornamental. If you want to pop a few off and use it for your salsa, you can do that also. The other one I like is this New Mex Twilight. So these are really kind of cool because these remind me of the Christmas bulbs, the Christmas lights, the C9s or the C7s. And I really like the way it holds these fruits up above the foliage and then just the way they pop up. So this one is interesting because as they mature, they start out purple and then they change to red and orange and yellow. So you just get a rainbow full of colors. These guys are also hot. So Basket of Fire was at about 80,000. New Mex is about 30 to 50,000. So they're not as hot as Basket of Fire, but they are much hotter than a jalapeno. So just to give you an idea, because we always get those questions about these ornamental peppers. The other one is really something completely different. So we've got Purple Flash here. And you're saying, all right, well, that's pretty cool looking foliage. It's got the purple color. The new growth has sort of a creamy white to it. But where are the peppers? And this is one that we're really not growing for the peppers. We're growing it more for the foliage. Remember, it doesn't always have to be about the flower or the fruits. Sometimes it's about the effect that foliage could give you in the garden or in a combination plant or something like that. This one produces little round peppers, maybe about the size of a BB or so, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But they're going to be red and they're going to be down in that plant. So this is one that we're not growing for the ornamental look of the fruit, but we're growing it for the ornamental presentation of the foliage. So 3 great peppers. They do extremely well down here, and they present themselves, especially now for fall. I think these colors lend themselves. Halloween's just around the corner and things like that. So these colors definitely lend themselves to this time of year. Vinca, another annual Cora series, is a Texas superstar. I love the Cora series. The great thing about them is aerial Phytophthora, which is a fungus. So in the past, especially in our humid, wet areas, these plants would just melt away due to the fungus. We would have some serious issues with them. Now that they're resistant to this Phytophthora, we can use them, sort of in the full sun, the way you would use impatiens in the shade, and it would give you that look. The great thing about the coras are you can get them in upright habits, you can get them in cascading habits. And just to let you know, and I started to see them this year already, they've improved the Cora series like anything else. And so next year you should definitely see Cora XDR. And X means extra disease resistance. So the first Coras came out, they were resistant to only one strain of Phytophthora. And just like anything else, everything mutates, there's more strains. And so the original wasn't always, wasn't as resistant to as many strains as the new XDR series will be. So we've got even better disease resistance. So these plants will perform extremely well through the spring and summer in the landscape. On the perennial side, now we're looking early season. Okay, so the Texas Gold Columbine, Aquilegia. This is one that's going to be probably about a February bloomer. So, as everybody's starting to get itchy about getting out in the garden again, and what can I start growing, and what can I start, planting, this one will come up and put on this show, and it looks like a bunch of shooting stars, bright yellow flowers. In the wintertime, you want it in the full sun. The plants will love it. In through early spring. Through the heat of the summer, if it's in the full sun, it's probably going to die back and go dormant. So this is one that does well if it's planted maybe under or around a deciduous tree where it gets the full sun in the winter. But then in the summer, it leaves out and it provides it some shade. And it's got a nice texture. You can see the foliage down in through here. The foliage has a nice texture, nice presentation to it. But again, this is an early bloomer. So this is the one that starts to get you excited that spring is just around the corner. Here's a great tropical. I love Caesalpinia, pride of Barbados. In the drier climates, in San Antonio, Austin, but even here in Houston area, this thing is just nonstop. I would say probably July through August, and then throughout the rest of through the fall. This one just presents itself, and it's got a great color contrast. The foliage is very fine to it, so it's really nice and clean. And then once it's established, it is very drought tolerant. And that's one of the things a lot of people forget about is when we talk about drought tolerance, the plant has to be established. That root system has to get into that soil profile and established in order for it to get through drought conditions. But Pride of Barbados definitely gives you that tropical island feel when it is in bloom. This was one variegated tapioca. So we're looking at this plant back here. It reminds me almost of a Schufflera houseplant, which has that palmate foliage. But this one is just loves the heat. And does great through the summer. We're growing it for its foliage, so you can see the contrast of the vinca down below here and how it contrasts against that foliage. So this is one that is a really cool plant. I know when I first moved to Texas, I did new product development, and we had this in what we called our R&D area. It was called the bullpen. I had never seen this plant before, and I'm one of those Yankees that moved from the Northeast. So I thought it was a house plant, but here it is a landscape plant, and it is one that just, again, further back in the bed as they use it here, whether as a specimen or you have multiple ones, and it does extremely well. When the cold weather comes, though, even once we get below 50 in the 40s, the foliage is going to drop, and you're just going to have sticks. But then wait until the spring, and you can cut it back and it'll come back from the base. So really great plant, adds a unique color and texture. We've got some roses, we've got earthkind roses, but we've also got some roses in the Texas Superstars. And this is Belinda's Dream. This is one that if you want a hybrid tea look and you want some fragrance and you like pink flowers, Belinda's Dream is one that you might want to consider. You can see the growth on this. It has very little, it gets very little black spot. It will get it. but it's usually not enough to really affect the plant's overall performance and habit. The only knock I have on this is it's not a self-cleaner. So as these flowers mature, it holds on to these petals, and then they'll turn like a tan and a brown, and it'll almost look like, you know, a wet tissue, a wad of wet tissue. So this is when you're probably going to have to come through and, either cut them and enjoy them, bring them in the house, enjoy that fragrance and that look, or you're going to have to deadhead it. But it really gives you, if you like that hybrid tea look, which a lot of us do, and it's got fragrance. So there's another added plus. Belinda's Dream is a great plant to have in your landscape. We've got blue bonnets. We can't not talk about the blue bonnets, and we've got the Texas Maroon. So this was some breeding. We've got the blue, we've got the maroon. This is the one we heard about a couple years back that showed up in the beds at UT. Again, another spring bloomer. So we had talked about the columbine, the aquilegia. That's an early bloomer. Then we would follow it with Texas Maroon blue bonnet. So again, think about where these plants go in a succession of your garden, and when they bloom, and how you can use them. Again, it's going to be in the front, about 12 inches tall tops, maybe 14, but it's a nice color. It's a very clean color to it. So these would work nicely with the blues, that we normally see. These will definitely jump out and catch your eye. White stream lobularia. This is one that if you like alyssum, so we are in alyssum season now. Alyssum likes it cool weather. And the problem with alyssum about April-ish or so, maybe even end of March, depending on how soon we get warm, it doesn't like the warm weather. It starts to crash on us. It looks lousy. This lobularia white stream gives you the same look as alyssum. It's got the great fragrance. It attracts beneficial insects, but it flowers throughout the entire summer. So if you want a low ground cover, low growing with lots of flowers, brings in beneficial insects, this lobularia is one you might want to consider. And there's white, there's lavenders, there's like a darker purple, there's even some cream colors out there now. So there's a lot more color options out there. But I was skeptical at first, but once we planted it and grew it out in the trial, I was very happy with it, and it just was nonstop flower production. And we've also got some edibles. So Victoria Red Grape. Now this is going to be a table grape. So if you're interested in growing some grapes, Victoria Red is a table grape. It is seeded, but look at the flower, the berry clusters on it, and the fruits are quite large. So it's got that nice red skin. It is Pierce's disease tolerant. Which is a problem that some of the growers have, especially in the humid areas. But this one is tolerant. So tolerant doesn't mean it can't get it, but it will hold up much better than some of the other varieties. And this is, growing vines and especially growing grapevines are a little bit different. So if you need more information on that, we've got a whole section within Aggie Horticulture on growing grapes. But this is one I just wanted to touch on, some of the edibles that are also Texas superstars. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. Again, my name is Paul Winski. I am here in Harris County. And I guess I will open it up to the team. Are there any questions that are posted that I can answer?
Well, we had a question about where to get maroon blue bonnet seeds or maroon bonnet seeds, whatever. And Skip Richter said they're sometimes available in garden centers, including and wild seed farms by mail. Do you know of any other sources?
I do not, but I guess I would recommend checking with the Texas Superstar website because they may have some sources there also.
Okay, thank you.
All
I'll
right.
put that in the chat again.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if not,
we just got one more.
okay.
Do you have any ideas about the Nacogdoches rose?
Okay, so the Nacogdoches rose, which is a Texas superstar, but it goes by Grandma's Yellow. Again, this is another one, you know, the yellow rose of Texas. It gives you that hybrid tea look. And I know we trialed this way back when. I do not believe it has a fragrance. We saw a little bit more black spot on this rose than we did, say, compared to Belinda's Dream. But it is a nice rose. It performs well. So I would, I would definitely, if you can find Grandma's Yellow and you're looking for a yellow rose, definitely give it a shot because I think you'll be happy with it. All right.
What about any pansies that are superstars?
You know what? There are no pansies in the Texas superstars, but I would just say there are plenty. The varieties or the series that I look for, Colossus does well early on. It's a large flowered one. There's also a series out there called Matrix that performs extremely well here, early season while we still have the heat. So they both do well. And then, I always like to tell people, don't overlook the violas. The violas, the panolas, and things like that are some of the series. They're smaller flowers, but they produce more flowers. So, it's the trade-off. Do you want fewer large flowers, or do you want lots of small flowers? So, there's a lot of good series. Like I said, the Matrix and the Colossus do extremely well, and then the violas, you can't go wrong with any of them either. And the color combinations that are available in those are just mind-boggling. So you can match the color of your house, you can match the pot, you can contrast with the pot. There are just a lot of options. There's been a lot of breeding that's gone into those two genus that your imagination is wide open. You can go with whatever you want. So they're both very good plants for down here. All right.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So with that, I guess first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a blast doing this. Anytime I can talk about plants is a good day for me. And as you can see up here is next week, we will have our speaker at 10 a.m. on the 28th. We'll be talking about growing healthy palms, and that will be Ginger Easton Smith, who is our agent down in Aransas County. So please register for that talk and step back in to learn something about growing some healthy palms. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope you all have an enjoyable day. So have a great week.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.